Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and if you're noticing something a little bit different on the screen right now, that's because we've got myself along with three patrons off to the right. This shouldn't be too surprising if you watched my interview with Jared Huckabee on the Citizens of the Stars episode. Son of a bitch, my mic was muted. I just looked up and it was blinking at me. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and try that again. It's so weird that you guys could hear me, but I'm looking at it actually blinking and it's
Yeah, I
picking up
could
over
hear you.
So I don't think it was actually muted, but I didn't want to actually risk it. So, clap, here we go.
Okay.
Hey guys, STLYoungblood with you, and if you're noticing a new display on your screen right now, it's myself with three patrons. This is our patron roundtable. If you watched my interview with Jared Huckabee on Citizens of the Stars, I kind of gave a little teaser that this is happening. And ultimately what we have here is a collection of people, or a sampling of people from my patron channel that are some just really, really passionate people about the game, where we have some really good discussions, and we're going to kind of bring some of that into a video format that we can share with all of you. So we're going to start off with some introductions. I'll let people tell you who they are and a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to jump into the agenda that you can see below. So we're going to start off with Clem. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Clem, back in November 2013. Been enjoying Star Citizen, been enjoying the channel. Got an interesting day job that I probably shouldn't talk about here, but you know, we're all the same when we get into Star Citizen.
That's right. All right, Brento?
Hey, I'm Brent. I think I'm back in the late winter, early spring of 2014. I know I missed the last round of all the LTI sales, which I think was in the fall of 2013, which was awesome. That's okay. I've melted and rebought everything since then many times. Yeah, I think Star Citizen is really cool. I like the persistence of it, that it's not just dogfighting, that there's more to the world. So I'm really excited and love the community.
Perfect. And Exodus.
I'm Exodus, and I live near Denver, Colorado. Been a backer. I started, I think, January 2015, so I'm a latecomer compared to you guys. Just love the game, love the whole environment, and I like the fact that a publisher is not putting this game out.
Yeah, that's a nice perk. So, all right, those are our introductions, and we're going to go ahead and move into the agenda. So I guess, how many of you guys have actually spent a significant amount of time in 2.6.1?
Not any so far. I haven't. I downloaded the PTU update, but I haven't actually fired it up yet. I've been distracted.
Well, that'll happen.
I've only got about 2 hours in, and I think that was 2.6.1 A and B.
Okay, and you're getting into the PTUs as well.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Exodus?
I played quite a bit. I played PU quite a bit, and I played Star Marine a fair amount. Not much Arena Commander.
Okay. Well, I guess since you've spent probably the most time in out of you three, what would you say your kind of general impressions of Star Marine are so far?
So far, 2.61 is much better than 2.6 was. A lot less desync issues overall.
Yeah.
The gameplay is a lot smoother. The only thing I don't like about it so far is the grenade marker. But besides that, I think it's a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. The grenade marker is kind of an interesting iteration. I don't really care for the idea of it, just because there's nothing about a grenade really that should have some sort of tracking on it. So it's just kind of a weird immersion thing for me. But even the implementation of it right now is kind of buggy. I was flying around, and this was 2.6.1 C, flying around at a ICC probe mission, and all of a sudden I was seeing grenade indicators popping up from Security Port Korea. So I'm not sure it's quite in the implementation they wanted it to be, but just kind of the idea of it even in the game is a little bit strange. I'm all for them using the audio cues and making it a little bit more obvious your grenades being thrown, or even making them a little bit more reflective, but that HUD display is really bizarre to me, and I don't really understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I agree. The sounds are actually plenty. I mean, once you know someone's throwing a grenade, you don't need to see it with an indicator, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I would say that kind of harkens back to a lot of the other games that are out. I can't think of a major FPS title right now that doesn't have something similar to that. And, when you're talking about the gameplay, actually being able to compete, it makes a lot of sense to have it. I mean, as far as Star Citizen, the game I was looking at in 2012, no, it doesn't fit to me at all.
Yeah.
But if you want to compete with Infinity Battlescape, or not Infinity Battlescape, yeah, the latest offerings from the FPS Titans, it makes sense in that respect.
Now, they try and correlate the Star Marine gameplay, or what it's going to eventually be, closer to something like a, I don't know, like a Ghost Recon or a Rainbow Six or something a little bit more tactical. I haven't played a lot of those. At least for years, I haven't played a lot of those. So, I mean, do we see things like grenade indicators in those games as well?
The one I've got the most experience watching, not actually playing, is probably CSGO. I've got a 14-year-old that plays it almost daily now. I don't recall if there's indicators in there or not. I don't recall Rainbow Six ever having it in any version that I've ever played, but I haven't played the latest release.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, when you compare to that, yeah, I think you've got a good point there.
Yeah, I haven't played 6-1 with the indicators in, but I don't like the idea. The thing that I like about Star Citizen is the fact that it feels more realistic. The FPS combat should be deadly, because real combat is deadly. So
Right.
I think the indicators, and obviously they don't work right, but yeah, I think the audio cues and maybe making them a little bit physically easier to see is fine.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. It's a really minor thing. In Star Marine, I don't mind it. I'm sure when I'm running around a ship, I'm not going to want to necessarily see that as well. Star Marine to me is a in-game arcadey type of thing. So, if they wanted to
Right.
say that this game within a game, it's something that's present and you're going to see, that's fine for me. But it's also kind of training for what you're seeing in the verse. So even from that stance, it's kind of a weird. I don't. It just doesn't seem to match the description of what they kind of sold us on what the first-person combat was going to be like. I think if they put in something maybe lore-related, that might make us a little bit more understanding, at least for me. If they said something like your visors are capable of detecting different things, or your mobi-glass is able to
Right.
synchronize and detect that there's an explosive nearby, almost like like some of the perks in like Call of Duty, for example. You get that, what is that, situational awareness or whatever. Something to that extent makes sense if they gave us that explanation. And I mean, hell, I
Right.
guess they don't really owe us one, but I think for me it would go a little ways to really understanding why they decided to put it in.
Yeah, I think that it has to be justified in fiction some way. I mean, when you bring up the menu, you bring up your Moby Glass, and you actually bring your Moby Glass up, because if you're crouched down and things, sometimes it's not in the right place in front of your face. So to me, that's what Star Citizen is. I mean, people who want to just fly spaceships around and shoot people, there's games like that out there. I mean, Elite Dangerous, you can already do that. So, there's your game. It's done. Star Citizen is supposed to be the best damn space sim ever. Space sim. Simulation of living and working and fighting in space, not a video game.
Well, they advertise the game as a skill-based game, and so when you have, and right now the way the current iteration of it is you can have 8 people per team, and you might have 8 grenade indicators across your screen. So, I mean, it even gets a little confusing. The sound, so long as you can hear it, I think that's plenty to let people know there's a grenade that landed near them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and I think you hit on something else earlier, Exodus, too, that I think was important, was the desync in Star Marine seems to be significantly better. The desync in Flight in 2.60 was terrible. For me at least, it made flying in Arena Commander a really frustrating experience. Even with the flight model, you're flying really close to other players, and you're sitting there with your pips perfectly lined up, and you can see your shots literally about to hit the hull of the ship, and you get no hit indicator. That for me was a real kind of deal breaker. And what's funny is now that in 2.6.1, I spent a little bit of time in Arena Commander as well. The desync doesn't seem to be the problem. The problem now seems to be a combination of like ESP and the pips not lining up. you know, I'll see my shots not going where my pips are supposed to be. And I saw the most accurate description of this as possible as far as the ESP issue was. It's almost like two magnets kind of going towards each other and like pushing off of each other, you know, kind of opposite forces. And that's exactly what it feels like when you're flying with the joystick right now with ESP on. You know, you go to line up your shot and then all of a sudden your ship kind of just jerks out of the way a little bit. It's just, it's a weird kind of change. Like, I feel like the desync isn't the problem anymore, but there's other problems with actually hitting your target.
No, I agree. I've noticed the same thing. The pips lining up, so they increased, or they brought together the weapon velocities a little more.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that pips are tighter, but I agree with you. When I've played, it doesn't seem like the weapons are hitting where the pips are.
I want to say it was back in what 1.3 or 1.4, one of the later patches in the 1 series. We had a very, very similar issue. I don't think it was related so much to the flight mechanics as just working out the guns, but it's got that same feel to it to me in 2.6. It's a little better in 2.6.1, but going between mouse and keyboard and joystick, it doesn't quite feel right. I mean, I know we're trying to get there, but it's kind of off-putting of not being able to hit when you know you lined it up just like you did 2 patches ago.
Right. Well, and I mean, we've got the changes, like Exodus mentioned, to the weapon velocities, and I think they've made some changes to the weapon damages as well. You know, for example, I know I ran the tarantulas almost exclusively on my Saber, and the amount of damage they did was crazy, and probably a little bit too high. Now that I'm flying and when I actually land my shots, I notice the amount of damage they're dealing is less, but it's really hard, especially on like the energy weapons where you're hitting shields a lot of the time, but when you're not getting the actual damage points and damage feedback until those shields go down. I don't really have a good feel right now for what the weapons are to provide them with feedback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, when you can't land your shots or you can't predictably land your shots, it doesn't really matter how powerful the weapons are.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I guess if you're not landing them predictably, they better hurt like hell when they actually land.
That's why I go all gimbaled all the time, man.
Well, you're mouse and keyboard, though, right?
Mouse and keyboard, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it must be nice. I would love to be able to have that control.
You know what? It's a great control scheme. That's the thing. I got in a discussion with a friend of mine, also a backer, although he's trying to avoid the hype disappointment cycle, and so he's really like kind of not paying too much attention to it.
Yeah. It's not a bad strategy.
But yeah. But I said, you know, the reason that real airplanes don't use a mouse and keyboard is because when you are physically being moved around, a mouse is a really bad control interface because it moves with you. But if you are sitting still, it is an excellent control interface. So I would imagine that if there were pilots, I mean, do drone pilots, I guess they use sticks still, but I would imagine that they're probably going to transition over to mouse and keyboard because it's just so easy. Just point and click.
Yeah, speaking of that, I bet drone pilots are the Star Citizen player.
I bet so. Well, maybe not though, because drones are really. I actually talked to a guy that was part of the drone program, and he said that they're really like, which is good because there's obviously a latency issue, because you know the drone pilot might be sitting like here in Kansas City, and the drone is flying recon in, you know, Iraq or Afghanistan or some other place that we don't know about. And so there's this latency issue, but there's also the fact that the drones are designed to fly very, very efficiently and quietly. They're not designed to fly acrobatics. And so they're not terribly maneuverable. And they, you know, if an enemy sees one and can get a missile on it, it's hosed. All
right, well, let's change that in. The Star Citizen players, once we get combat fighting drones, are going to be the future of our Air Force. How's that then?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So that's probably a stretch. But anyways, I guess the last thing with 2.6.1, I guess, unless you guys have anything else you want to, you know, kind of chat in on, would be the updates to the speeds. You know, we got 2.6.0 and we got the new flight model, right? And I think everything got brought in real close, and the speeds were dropped significantly, and we see that cruise mode gets removed. 2.6.1 comes in, and all of a sudden we've got slightly increased speeds and more of a difference between the ships. I guess for those of you that have actually flown in 6.1, What are your real like thoughts on that? Like, have you noticed like the Gladius is all of a sudden a better pilot or a better option than it was in .0, or is it still similar enough to where it's sort of a minor tweak in your mind?
I think it's much better. So before, the speeds were pretty fast, then they went to what I consider really slow.
Yeah,
Right
drop of
now,
50%. Yeah,
yeah, I kind of felt like they'd always come back towards the middle on that, and I think right now is the best it's ever felt between the different ships. And the biggest thing I noticed about it is 2.6, it felt like every ship was the same speed, pretty much the same maneuverability to me.
yeah,
But now you get a lot different feel. So when I fly a Saber, I feel like I'm flying a fast attack craft. If I fly a Hornet, I feel like it's kind of slow and just tough. But I
yeah.
feel like it's a lot better.
Well, and I feel like the difference between those two ships right there is what I noticed the most, because almost everybody in Arena Commander right now is flying a Super Hornet. It's just kind of the go-to ship at the moment, because I think that's a carryover from 2.6.0 when, like you mentioned, everybody's speed is essentially the same. Everybody's agility was essentially the same. The amount of boost fuel that you actually have on board is more of a differentiator than really anything. So, and now that we're in 2.6.1, I think we're seeing a lot of people carry over still using the Super Hornet. And so when I came in on my Saber, I had a bunch of different targets to actually engage, and it really did feel like the Saber had a significant speed and agility advantage over something like the Hornet. I was able to stay behind them much more effectively. So I think kind of that general range, like as far as the speeds go, I think it was a really positive change for where it's at. And I agree. This is actually my favorite flight model to date. Now, it's hard to tell from a
100%.
combat perspective because I can't hit shit right now in the game, but
I
just from
agree.
purely flying, yeah.
For the flight model, I've got to agree with that. I've been out in the Starfarer, I've been out in the Gladius, I've been out with haven't been able to get a Caterpillar out. That's been irking me a good bit. The Vanguard, and I think I flew the 85X for some reason. And as far as the actual flight mechanics in 2.6.1, I like it. Everything feels about where I thought it should. I mean, I kind of want to go back to the Freelancer on launch day for the Freelancer, but I'll take what I've got right now.
Yeah.
I miss clipping around Yell at 1,000. It was great.
Yeah, the Misk Razor before the Razor was out.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, you mentioned the Starfarer. I hadn't really flown it all that much. It was really interesting getting into the Persistent Universe in .1, and just feeling the speed was slow, but it was kind of like you would expect it to be. I think the top speed on it, the Gemini, is 95 right now.
About that.
I was actually kind of shocked at how the overall lack of agility on that ship. I mean, it feels probably like it should. I can't imagine what the hell's going to happen when it's fully laden, because that thing right now is like trying to, I don't know, like, I can't even think of a good analogy off the top of my head, but I mean, that thing is a behemoth to fly right now. Like, I took it to Korea just to kind of dick around, and I mean, I couldn't keep anything in my sights. Boosting, fully in reverse, decoupled, nothing. I mean, it was a big change.
But, for cargo, like when you start thinking about, I'm going to pick this up, I'm going to fly it over there, or I'm going to have to navigate through a nebula so I can get some fuel, something along those lines, there's a lot more challenge there than there was in any of the previous flight models, and that's something I'm looking forward to in the game. I mean, I'm the guy that wants to get a flight yoke to fly the Starfarer, so.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else on 2.6.1 you guys want to talk about before we move on? No? All right. So 3.0, I think, is obviously the one that most people are interested in. It's probably the biggest game-changing patch for all of us. We're starting to talk about the ability to, land on planets. We're talking about the ability to haul cargo. We're talking about a more tight reputation system where you can actually conduct piracy and you can go bounty hunting, and there's going to be a lot more to it. So 3.0 is going to be a really big deal, and I think we all know that. So I guess let's start with the hot topic here, obviously being release date, and then we can kind of talk about what we're actually going to get out of 3.0, or at least what we think we're going to get. So with 2.6.1 and 2 supposedly on the horizon, I think that release date now for 3.0 is a little in question for something that was supposed to be back in December. So who's got any strong opinions there? Any thoughts? What do you guys think is coming?
I don't know. I don't know what the blockers are. So that's the real question is what's the problem? You know, what are they fixing right now to get it out?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
if it's bad animations or something like that, that might be easier than if they can't get the AI working the way they want or something like that. You know,
right.
these are on different kind of levels.
Well, and I think the question that we probably all got to go back to is, you know, is this how much is concurrently in development? You know, is 3.0 heavily dependent on 2.6.1 and 2.2 getting completed and outside of just a
Right.
timeline? Or are there a lot of assets and game mechanics there that need to be fixed before we get to 3.0 and then we're not seeing any development on 3.0 right now?
Yeah. Yeah, how much overlap there is between the teams is a big question as well.
I would say, I mean, game mechanics seems to have been a major issue for getting 3.0 out, because 3.0 is basically, especially if you read the Aaron Roberts interview that just was recently released, it's really the tech, and until all of that tech is in line, 3.0 really can't be given to the masses.
Yeah.
I'll be looking at streaming being one of your big ticket items. And I mean, that's it. Your computer probably can't load 3.0 until streaming's working correctly. You know, if you've got a $5,000 desktop, sure, but most of us don't play Star Citizen on a $5,000 desktop. I'm honestly thinking sometime in April. I really hope we're seeing it by the end of June, but I think there's cause for April for a release.
Well, it was interesting hearing Aaron Roberts say that we've got 2 to 3 major releases this year. So, you know, if we're talking about that major releases, we're probably looking at the you know, not 2 decimals. We're looking at the first decimal only. So,
right.
You know, we're probably looking at 3.0, 3.1, and maybe 3.2. So if they're going to try and get those additional things out there, I would say if they're going to hit that 3 release kind of deadline or goal, I think we have to have a release for 3.0 probably by July. You know, because then all of a sudden you're giving yourself 3 months to get each of the subsequent patches out. The good news is that the development for the .0 is going to be significantly more involved than .1 and 2, because you're talking about an actual change to the game engine, the way we interact, the overall game environment. When you start talking about .1 and .2, you're kind of talking about careers more than anything. So it's possible that they can crank those out a little bit faster, and those could even be things that are being developed today. But it's hard to envision a situation where we get to 3.2 if we don't have 3.0, you know, probably by July at the latest, I would think.
I'm thinking 3.0 and 3.1 are going to end up squashed together if we're looking at a June or July launch. You know, whether or not we're going to see 3.2 and 3.3 before December, I don't know. But I realistically expect to see whether or not we get 3.2 as 3.2 or 3.2 as 3.1. You know, you're looking at 3 major releases this year.
Yeah, how true they are to that roadmap that they gave us.
Well, I mean, to me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think the roadmap, I mean, that's obviously been pushed out. I think a lot of this discussion, might be nice to revisit this once they release a schedule for 3.0. But I think a lot of the other thing that you guys didn't quite touch on yet was the network aspect. And I'm kind of wondering how well they've developed the network code enough to get 3.0 out. Because I know that 3.0, wasn't that supposed to bump up to 64 players?
Yeah, and they talk about that a little bit in the Aaron Roberts interview. You know, it was more about just kind of their goal of getting thousands of people on the same server, and they talk a little bit about the network refactoring and how important that is to 3.0, but there wasn't any real specifics outside of things like, you know, the item containers and rendering and the impact that has on performance of the server. It wasn't so much as far as like getting onto that next star engine, for example.
Well, I believe you had said hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, well, I was going a little more. I think he was getting a little optimistic. He said that he didn't think that. I like that he said he didn't think they were getting there this year. If you're not even sure you're getting 3.0 out this year, let's not talk about hundreds of thousand players in an instance.
Well, I mean, you've got games out there that have done tens of thousands. And that's that's up to 5 years ago, I believe. That record was set or close to it.
Well,
So, I mean,
yeah,
the technology
but on the
exists.
same server and on the same server are different. You know what I mean? So like back in 98, 99 when I was playing, yeah, I mean when I was playing EverQuest and there'd be like 5,000 people on the Karana server or whatever, like those people are scattered over many, many multiple zones. And even something like World of Warcraft that uses seamless zones, or I assume games like PlanetSide do as well, there's still different zones. And so that's the thing. I take it when they talk about how many people are on a server, that's how many people are able to see and interact with each other at the same time. And hundreds of thousands is not realistic at all by any stretch of the imagination. You can't see and interact with hundreds of thousands of people in most places in the real world. That would be a major, large football stadium, really bigger than most football stadiums, where you could see and interact in real time with good latency with every other person in that stadium, and that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen in Star Citizen's time frame. I don't think. That's an insane amount of net traffic. It's an insane amount of processing, server side and client side.
Well, and I think the tricky thing there is it's going to be a hard thing to even prove, because all of a sudden you're talking about, we've got, what, 1.7 million, I think, citizens right now, but that's including multiple accounts. So what are the odds that you're even going to ever have 100,000 people in the same location when you're talking about 100 different star systems and all these people playing? You know, not everybody's playing every hour of every day as much as we'd like to. You know, you're never going to have a situation where you have that many together. I think the question then becomes, what's the actual ceiling of what's capable, and what do we actually experience there, and how much of that instancing system is still alive?
I think if they can get 1,000 people, that will be sufficient. That will cover anything that's going to happen.
If you looked at, like, I was looking at their architecture, a lot of the images that were shown in ATV. They're doing something interesting and, in my opinion, very unique. The client data that's going to be bashed around and handed around, it's not like anything I've ever seen before. We're not talking about, 10,000 people stream data to the server and then that one server streams data to you. It's almost like there's a network of servers, and they're basically going to prune what you need to know and what you don't. And it looks more like a modern messaging system, like a computer, or we're talking about machine data, the way they kind of prune and decide who needs to know what's relevant. And the rest of the game will probably work off of a prediction model. I don't really need to know where that guy is 30 kilometers out. I need to know when he gets within, say 10 or 12.
Right.
And you can do that with trivial amounts of data. You can know where 10,000, 20,000 objects are with a surprisingly small amount of traffic. Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's believable. My thing is, if you are having to, it's the number of people, what I'm interested in is the number of people that could, say, engage in a battle where you need to know with a good degree of precision where everybody else is. So like a ship battle. Right now, the only game I'm aware of that has battles, space battles at large, would be EVE Online, and they have to use time dilation to get it to work, and it still doesn't work. I mean, really, people who have been, I dabbled in EVE over the years off and on. I was never in one of these big alliances that wage war on each other and cost hundreds of thousands of real world dollars, which is insanity. But they would say, like, you, I mean, and if I don't know if all of you guys have played EVE, but I mean, you basically select a target, especially if you're a Caldari missile boater like me. You select a target and you hit go, and it goes, and you just hope your shield regen holds out. You're not doing anything. So if you've got ridiculous lag, it doesn't matter. People that have to get in the right range for their blasters to line up and all that stuff, that is a little bit more complicated, but it's nothing compared to talking about your pips going here and your shots going here. I mean, getting 1,000 people, people firing multiple guns to get their pips lining up, that is a huge issue. And any more than that, knowing that if I know that, my game knows that Clem is out here on the other side of the solar system moving this direction, that's fine, because that's a tiny amount of data, and it can update that every couple of minutes, because I don't need to know that real time. It's not affecting me. But when you get close, when you're in the sort of the local scenery, if I can see you and I can shoot at you, I need to know exactly where you are. And I think
Right.
1,000 is a large enough number to handle any battle we're likely to see. And it's also, I think it's a tall order, but I feel like it's probably more attainable.
Well, let me kind of throw this out there. I think of it as spheres. So my ship has a 15-kilometer sphere, and
Mhm.
your ship has a 15-kilometer sphere. The server only really cares about where those spheres meet.
Mm-hmm.
So it cares about the interaction between our two ships. And if your system is set up, especially in a microservices architecture, to only care about the overlaps, you can have over a 50, 60, 70 kilometer battle space.
Mm-hmm.
You can have an insane amount of people and handle the processing on that, assuming you've got the right overhead. What they talk about, the gym, which I'm assuming they're going to have lower tiers.
Right.
I think you can have a battle of even several thousand people across a very large battle space.
Yeah,
and
if
it
it's a big
feels
enough
real time
space.
to everybody involved.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
well, and I
Contract
mean,
Crime.
if we even think about just an arena commander map, I mean, it's not uncommon to see people from 10,000 kilometers away. So, if we're talking about a sphere of 15, for example, like when you got a ship that's 10,000 kilometers away, you don't even see them. You see a little
Right.
blip on your HUD, and that's about it. So.
Yeah. And all you care about is, did he launch a missile at me? Is there a round coming my way?
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of work on the programming side. It is a colossal task to try to do that. But
Mhm.
from everything I've read, I think that's the path they're taking.
Mhm.
I agree, and I think, and we're talking about release dates, so I see 3.0 probably coming out sometime between June and September in my mind.
Before Gamescom?
Yeah, I hope it's before Gamescom. I definitely hope it's before Gamescom.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess knowing 3.0 and what we've got coming in it, I mean, do you think there's anything that might be on the chopping block to get it out sooner, or do you think everything's going to be more reliant on the technology more than anything else?
Yeah, I don't think that cutting anything. I'm trying to remember everything that they promised for 3.0, but I think that once they get this streaming or whatever you want to call it, this net code and this ability for things to fade in and out of your zone of concern, that once they've got that figured out, everything else is easy. I mean,
Yeah.
everything else is an FPS game basically, and they've got that working. That part works.
So-
More or less. I mean, there's latency issues, there's desync issues, but I think that once they have the big ticket items figured out, the rest of it just is details. The rest of it falls into place.
Well, 3.0, so basically the main points, I guess, are the initial mission system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then piracy and cargo. Those are the three main things I remember being promised for 3.0.
Yeah, well, and bounty hunting is in there with cargo. Or with
Oh yeah,
piracy as well.
that's right.
Right.
And then obviously planetary landings and stuff like that, and some exploration on planet side. But I think from career-wise, I think cargo, piracy, bounty hunting, those are the big new ones that we're expecting.
Right. So I'd argue that the planetary landing, I think they pretty much have a handle on that, and I would guess that that's pretty close to a go.
I agree.
The mission system, based on some of the latest interviews, I think the mission system might not quite be there. I think that's one of the things they're still working on.
Mm-hmm.
And the cargo system, I don't remember hearing any updates recently on where they are on being able to lock cargo down.
I don't think I've seen anything on cargo since we got the cargo, I guess, game mechanic overview over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
As far as here's how you're going to manage your cargo in your manifest and that sort of thing. I can't think of much of anything that we've heard since then on that game format.
I thought they brought up something in an ATV it was after Gamescom, they did something about it in an ATV, or maybe it was one of the reverse diverses, but they were talking about how we were going to have the ability to basically click it and the boxes are going to show up in the ship. And then, you get to your destination, you click it and the boxes disappear. We're not getting the ability to manually manipulate cargo with 3.0. And, I'm fine with that. You got to start somewhere. But yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, the tech is probably the reason 3.0 has not been released yet. I mean, if you like when you compare the ship release dates, like the ships based on the ship pipeline, and compare that to the schedule just by going by the ships promised, 3.0 would have been out quite a while back based on the ship release schedule.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's definitely something else. It's not art assets, in my opinion.
No, I don't think it's anything like that either. I mean, I think it's interesting because I think they could probably release it in a kind of watered down state, and I still don't think it would happen that much faster. But I think that's what we're probably going to see. What you kind of just mentioned as far as the shortcut to getting cargo out is you click and it's automatically in your ship. They'll, kind of that Elite Dangerous approach. You never really see your cargo unless you're scooping it out of open space. I wouldn't be surprised if bounty hunting works the same way. It probably is going to be kind of that Elite Dangerous approach at first as well. You're probably not going onto somebody's ship, grabbing them, containing them, tossing them in the holding cell, and then flying, to Security Port Korea to turn them in for a bounty. It's probably shoot to kill for that first iteration of bounty hunting, and then you get the credits for whatever their bounty actually is. I haven't heard them say anything about that, but especially if we're going that way with cargo, where it's kind of, I hate calling it a shortcut. Let's call it the starting point. If they're saying that the starting point for cargo is click and your cargo ends up in your ship, bounty hunting, just getting a kill, getting your credits kind of is, I think, the natural progression. The one that's a little bit more interesting is piracy, because there's not really a shortcut there. It's not like you can destroy a cargo freighter and then you get their cargo. It doesn't really work like that. It's how are they? I think that's the one where I'm more interested in. How are they going to get that initial implementation of that into the game, and how do we handle that? Because walking away with the cargo is the important part, or walking away with the enemy ship is the important part. So I think when we start talking about that, it's disablement of enemy ships is really important. So things like electronic warfare, not distribution weapons, distortion weapons.
Disruption.
Yeah, distortion. Those types of things I think are mechanics that almost naturally have to kind of fit in there. Or you have to get the item system down much better to a point to where you can say, I'm actually aiming at your engine so I can get you stuck in space.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about there, they're really harping about AI. They want AI. They want subsumption running with 3.0, which I think we kind of missed when we were talking about blockers. Maybe the target of piracy, which I'm hoping when the game launch, they target piracy primarily as PvE. There's a run going from here to here. Go get their cargo. Go destroy their ship. Go stop the shipment. Maybe not necessarily load it up in your ship and bring it back to me, but go interfere with other people. Hopefully more. Hopefully most of that being AI, since they're supposed to be 90% of the world.
Yeah.
And now you've got the ability to go pirate, and you got the ability to practice on the AI instead of spending all of your time beating up the guy that just wants to learn how to fly Starfarer from point A to point B.
Yeah, you got to remember there's a couple different types of people that like to play pirate. Some people like doing the role playing. Some people like just a different, like to mix things up. I'm going to be doing pirate on my alt account just to cover the actual aspect of the game. But then there's the people that play piracy because they like trolling people, and those aren't the people that are going to mess with an NPC at all. That's going to be PvP only. And there's a good portion of those in Elite Dangerous. Most of the people that fly around in Elite as piracy aren't noble pirates. I'm trying to make your life hell.
Yeah. They win when you get angry, which means that they win a lot.
Well, if you get angry,
it's a good
you do
game for
something
them.
And they generally kill you.
Yeah. But I mean, that's their end goal. Like somebody's end goal might be to have a fleet of 890 jumps, and somebody's end goal might be to have, whatever the biggest fleet of capital ships, and their end goal is to piss people off.
Yeah.
So they win every single time because you're pissed off. Unless you're some like Zen, there's like things happen. They win a lot.
With LTI.
Yeah, well, that's
that helps
true.
a lot. But
but it's still going to take a while to get your ship. You're just not paying for it. I mean, so
and maybe
it is what it is.
Space plan on there, and that is gone.
Well, yeah,
exactly.
That's all staying in my hangar in a safe.
I will say that what's funny is that in EVE Online, just to go back to that for a second, it's one of the games where when I would get ganked by somebody, I took it better than I do in most other games, which is funny because if I'm playing, like I played EverQuest 2, for instance, and a little bit on the PvP servers, and if I would die, I'd get like, I'd be so pissed. You know, especially if I was not trying to fight somebody at the time, or some other games I played way back, Dark Age of Camelot, stuff like that. But in Eve, you just kind of like, if the system security is below 5.0, you know, you just know you're going to get killed, and if you don't get killed, it's like, woo, bonus, you know.
Yeah,
but you just go in there
around.
expecting it. So I think that's going to have to be, and from what I understand of, it's going to be kind of similar in Star Citizen, where there's civilized systems where if you're doing stuff like that, there's going to be the potential of the law showing up, you know, the local advocacy, or, you know, UEE or whatever. Whereas out in pirate kind of systems out on the fringes, it's just, you know, if you get blown up, you get blown up. Sorry, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the Stanton systems, you know, the UE is obviously there, but you know, you get the impression there's going to be a lot of dangerous spaces, even in a system that's very well controlled. And that's where it's very unique in that way. It's not, this is a bad star system. This is a bad neighborhood. This is a bad street. This is a bad alleyway. And that's something I actually like about the game. I'm just, I have my concerns about my good neighborhood suddenly turning into a bad neighborhood, and I don't get much of a warning.
That's life.
It gives you something to shoot for, to rally all your friends together to clean out the riffraff.
That's
so
true.
You know,
And that's also a question I have for 3.0 is what level of AI they plan on implementing for that first get-go. Are they going to have like patrol ships out in certain areas in Crusader? Those are the questions I have when it comes to 3.0 with AI and pirating.
Well, and that's an interesting thought, because today we've got two different types of AI. You've got the cops and you've got the robbers. You know, it's I'm interested in just seeing the general citizens out there, the verse. You know, the other 90%. You know, where are they today? Let's get them in there. Let's start interacting with them. And, you know, I think that's probably going to be part of 3.0, at least to a certain extent. You know, probably a watered down version of what we can expect to see in the long term. But having the ability to go rescue somebody who's in trouble, or taking advantage of an NPC, or just coming across them in space and having that momentary thought to yourself of, oh, crap, what does this Idris want? You know, like, well, granted, they're not going to be an Idris, obviously, but, you know, if you're flying around in a Reliant.
Polaris.
Yeah, you know, and all the, well, I mean, even, you know.
There's definitely going to be Polaris out there in pirate hands.
Yeah,
definitely.
But what I'm getting at is not 3.0. You know, not 3.0. So, but, you know, 3.0 comes around, we get more AI, and you're flying around in your Reliant, and all of a sudden the Super Hornet jumps in next to you. You've probably got that momentary panic of, oh my God, do I got to run, or is this just Billy Joe from down the street? You know? So,
well, yeah, and I'm kind of expecting that. Yeah. I just to say I kind of expect that kind of AI in 3.0 at a very basic level, based on their previous input.
You know, you say no Idris in 3.0, but they've been very clear that the ship is done.
Yeah. The Idris is just ready.
They're not going to show you that ship until Squadron 42 comes out, though.
They're not going to spoil it. I mean, that's one of the...
They beat around the bush on that. They have.
Yeah.
And they've said at one point that the reason it's not out is the game will not support it. And if they get everything they promised for 3.0, there's a really good chance the Idris could be there.
I would wager against it, but technically it could happen.
So if you guys are betting, are you betting Squadron 42 first or 3.0 first?
Right, 3.0 first. I feel like 3.0 almost has to. I mean, I feel like the tech that they're hammering out. I mean, the big numbers of players obviously isn't an issue in Squadron 42, but I feel like the large number of ships, the large number of actors, is going to be a similar issue. I think that the tech needs to be there for both, and so I think that 3.0, I don't know. I feel like 3.0 is going to be first before Squadron 42.
I agree, but mine is more just from what I've heard about them talking about in like the development pipeline. Like, for example, when they start talking about, you know, an ATV, they're talking about like character animations, and they show us what they're working on. It is very rough and unpolished. You know, I mean, I'm not a developer. I've never claimed to be a developer, but when I look at that, I say there is a lot of work to be done, especially when they're just now working on the female character. We know there's going to be females in Squadron 42. You know, they're talking about the they're just now developing the way you're going to receive missions in Squadron 42. Like, if you're just now developing that, like, that's probably a pretty long ways off. For me, I'm kind of targeting 3.0 in summer, and probably Squadron is almost a holiday release. Drop the campaign right before they go out for their holiday break and drop the mic. Just you guys have fun. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, CIG out.
Yeah.
Taking a 10,000-foot conspiracy theorist view, it would
This
be
should
really,
interesting.
really smart. Yeah, be really, really smart to drop 3.0, go through the PTU process, drop 3.0, and immediately turn around and put Squadron 42 under NDA with Evocati. Because everybody's going to be focused on 3.0. Nobody's going to be looking for the next NDA leak for the next thing because we have 3.0.
Well, as an Evocati member, it's going to be hard to play the Squadron when I actually got the 3.0 to play.
I agree with that. I think that would be the fly in that, or the fly in the pudding there. But if you don't want, as much as they've held that to the chest, as much as they don't want Squadron 42 released, I could see something like that transpiring just to sort of pad the book.
And I honestly don't see Squadron 42 hitting Evocati, just because it's been proven already that they can't keep secrets. And as an Evocati, it pisses me off. I mean, you guys could attest. I mean, I don't share stuff with you guys on, the Discord channel, but, when it hits Reddit,
we try.
But I mean, once that stuff hits Reddit, I mean, it's just like, guys, come on. Like, they're not asking much out of us. Just try and follow the rules. And I think CIG's probably looking at it and saying to themselves, like, there's no way we can put anything with spoilers in front of these guys. It's got to purely just be based on getting feedback on the performance. I don't think there's any. I have a really hard time seeing Squadron hitting Evocati members. Maybe that's just me, though.
I kind of agree. I think that's going to be true.
Well, and I think the thing that's nice, though, is with it being a campaign, the storyline is very... It can be expansive, it can be progressive, but it's more limited than interactions in something like 3.0 would be. So I think that a campaign can really, truly be handled by, like, QA internally.
Do you really need Evocati for that? I don't think you need Evocati for Squadron 42.
I think you need it for the first mission. Because you need that we have not been touching this for the last 2 years.
Maybe
feedback and look at it. I don't think they're going to give it Evocati the whole game. I couldn't imagine that. But the first mission, the thing that we're probably going to get as a teaser before we actually get the game. I mean, they've mentioned that on several occasions.
Yeah, that's true. I could see that. Just as a pure tech test on something that everybody's going to have access to, anyways.
Right.
Yeah, I could see that. So, I guess just looping back, we kind of jumped around a little bit there. So as far as like piracy, that first iteration, I think we talked about cargo is click your cargo's there, fly somewhere, sell it. Bounty hunting, fly there, probably kill somebody, you're probably getting your credits. What is piracy? I mean, are we going to have to disable the ship? Are we going to be able to actually kill the engines and the shields or just the power plant?
Yeah.
And are we going to have to, how are we getting the cargo out? Is there an eject cargo option and the pilot can actually choose, like, you have an Elite Dangerous, or is it you're going to have to actually board these enemy ships?
I think the first iteration is just going to be a big Benny machine accumulation contest. Everybody's just going to have these Benny machines calling everywhere. And that's going to be the only cargo in the game is Benny machines.
That feels strangely right.
Without the ability to actually manipulate the cargo as an asset in the game, as something quote physically in the game, and without like I think STL said, without being able to target engines and things like that, I don't know how piracy would work. I mean, I feel like,
well,
is there a short version of it? I
don't know.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in the last ATV, didn't they talk about from Austin that they are pretty close to having the component system as far as grains and all that kind of stuff online? I thought they said they had that close to done. So maybe it's just going to be boxes that are full of these items, but you can't actually access them. But it'll say
I could see that. I could see like this is a box of weapons, but there's no weapons. There's just a box, and I think that would work fine.
The question still becomes, how do you get that box though?
Well, you'd have to get on the ship, and you'd have to have something, a tool with which to manipulate it. They either have to get the tractor beam system up and running, and or some sort of a space dolly that you could wheel it around with.
So what about disable the ship, and then they send out something to pick it up? Well, you don't actually do the cargo movement. They just fly another ship out there, and then they despawn, and you've completed your mission. What if you board the ship? Now you disable the ship, board the ship, fly the ship over here, and then we'll get the stuff out later. There's a couple of things you could do along those lines.
So then all you're
if you
really
take
do
the
is
whole
figure out
ship,
the boarding piece. It's an interesting thought. I'm wondering if there's a simple version too. If the simple version of bounty hunting becomes kill your target and that's it. I wonder if the simple version of piracy is go kill this person that's an advocacy person, or take this information that's going to blackmail other people to this location. By the way, if you get caught, your rating is going up. Like, I wonder if we see a kind of a simpler version like that. But if they can figure out the boarding piece, I think that's interesting. As far as just basically, it's essentially just a cargo mission at that point. But adding in the getting on board the ship part.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, you take out 2 buccaneers, you throw off your EMP, and you jump on.
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. All right, so I guess we're closing in on probably the 45-minute mark. So let's go ahead and move on to our last topic today. Everybody likes a little bit of ship speculation. There's 2 that we know are coming out. We have confirmation that the Hurricane is going to be next. I talked about this a little bit in the kind of upcoming concept ship video. So we know a little bit about the Hurricane. The Eclipse is a mystery. We know it's an Aegis ship. That's about it. So we'll get to that one in a second because we're really going to have to dig deep on that one. But as far as the Hurricane goes, Anvil ship, it was supposed to be a semi-starter. It was in that category with the Reliant. And it said to not be fast. It said to not, be super agile. It's supposed to have probably decent armor and a lot of small bore weapons. So I would have initially said that, being a semi-starter released with the Reliant, this ship probably initially would have been $60, $80, somewhere in that category. Terrapin was in that category as well. Terrapin sold for $195. So that opens things up. And I don't know what the hell to expect out of this ship anymore because it was very clear in my mind in the initial concept sale. Now, I don't know what to expect.
I'm with you on that. What about a Buccaneer competitor? That's something I've thought about because Anvil doesn't have anything in that price point that I'm aware of.
Yeah. I mean, I think Garin, one of our fellow patrons, actually mentioned a couple different tiers where maybe it's like a Buccaneer competitor, maybe it's like a Gladius competitor, which is kind of in that same range, or maybe it's like a Vanguard competitor since there's nothing really in that range either.
I hadn't considered the Vanguard. I mean, there's really nothing else like that out there.
Long range, 2-man, heavy fighter, big weapons. I mean, it really is. It's kind of that combination of like an explorer and a fighter, with kind of the best aspects of both, or at least some of the good aspects of both. But there's not really anything else that really does that. I mean, a Freelancer they're similar in agility, but the weaponry the weaponry is not even all that different, and at least until we start getting the changes. The turret makes a difference as far as the placement and the weapons on it. And the Vanguard's obviously more durable now. I guess the Cutlass could sort of do the same role to a certain extent, but obviously it's much, much cheaper and less effective as far as offense goes. So yeah, there's not really anything there outside of the fact if you look at, just the Battlefield upgrade kits almost being their own competitors in a way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I expect it to be a medium fighter. That's kind of what I thought. Or not medium, a heavy fighter. That's kind of what I've thought this whole time.
So, like, would you put it in that Vanguard competitor, or would you put it in like a Super
Vanguard and Redeemer category somewhere kind of in there?
I mean, and this is an Anvil ship, so they don't need a Super Hornet. They've got the Super Hornet.
Right.
That's
exactly.
correct.
Super Hornet. So,
and it's military based, right? And Anvil is pretty heavily military, so I expect it to be a heavy fighter, but
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was just thinking about the Carrack in those terms, and that actually it kind of fits that way.
Yeah. Well, it's either going to be on the top end of the spectrum or the bottom end of the spectrum, because they kind of got the middle covered with the whole Hornet line right now.
Yeah.
You know, and even the Gladiator's kind of in that range as a bomber. So we know what the role of the ship is, right? We know it's going to be a fighter of some sort. We know that it's going to have a lot of small bore weapons. You know, do we say that a lot of small bore weapons is like 6 forward-facing weapons and 2 small forward-facing turrets? That becomes like a Redeemer competitor? Or are we saying that,
Right.
you know, maybe you get 4 to 5 small bore weapons and it ends up being their entry-level fighter? Because they don't really have anything under the Hornet line. I mean, that's $125, so you could technically price this thing at about 80. Say that it's not going to fly real well, but it's going to have a lot of guns. So if something's in front of you, you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah, that's a possibility. And also depends on, I mean, what do they mean by small bore? Size 1? Is size 2 still small? You know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably 1 or 2. The question is, you know,
if it's size 2, and let's say it's got like 6 size 2s, that means you can have 6 size 1s on gimbals, and then now you're talking if it's a cheap fighter.
Well, and maybe it's something that
do
gives
some
you
damage.
that flexibility. You know, maybe it's something that has, you know, a bunch of size 2 hardpoints on it, and you're either going to have to roll 4 size 2s, or maybe you could roll 8 size 1s. You know, if you want to dual
that
link
would be
all of
really
them.
cool.
You know, or, you know, maybe you've got 2 size 2 hard points and 2 size 1 hard points, and you can kind of dual link and make your choice there. So I don't know. I mean, my gut says that it's probably going to be on the cheaper end. I think it's going to be that entry level. I think it's going to be that entry level Anvil fighter. My only trouble with that is there's already a lot of ships in that price range. So then it becomes, do they want to add something in that we don't really have a competitor for yet? We jump it up there in price and put it with the Vanguard? Or do we want to say they know that people get tired of these really expensive ships being sold? Maybe it's an opportunity to kind of appease the population with a cheaper ship and kind of offer, you know, make a bump in sales too.
Well, they keep hinting at the next space motorcycle. Maybe it's just a space motorcycle with 6 size 1s on it.
That would be cool.
I'm so waiting to see the next space motorcycle. I'm in love with those ships. I have way too many of them.
Ben's Day, they keep hinting that there's another motorcycle close, I think.
And didn't they say Space Hog? So, like, just a big beefy version, not the little streamlined one?
Right.
That would be very interesting.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up with the Eclipse. It's an Aegis ship. You know, I mean, if you start talking about Aegis, it's all combat with the notable exception of probably the Reclaimer. So, I mean, in that line, there are, you know, there's bombers, there's fighters, there's light fighters, there's interceptors, there's heavy fighters, there's, I mean, drop ships, gunships. I mean, they got a little bit of everything there. So, you know, there's not really anything I look at and say is just flat out missing from the Aegis line as far as combat is concerned. But you have to assume the ship is probably combat oriented. I mean, that's where the smart money is. But it doesn't have to be.
Right. I mean, just because a company makes vehicles for the military, it doesn't mean that they have to be necessarily combat, right? So it could be something maybe troop transport, something like not a drop ship necessarily, but something like a beefier, more military version of, say, the Freelancer or even the Connie. We don't have anything like that. I mean,
yeah, you don't have much for light military cargo transport.
You know, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big transport aircraft in the military. There's a lot of transport ships in the Navy, utility ships. So that would be interesting. Something that's maybe, you know, Freelancer size or a little bigger, but with better armor. Maybe not even more guns, because the Freelancer actually carries quite a bit of firepower. But maybe better armor, better shields for, you know, getting things to the front lines, that kind of thing.
Is there anything we can infer from the name? I mean, Eclipse, you know, blocks out the sun. It's probably pretty large, you know, or is that just some...
I think it just sounds
I was
cool.
thinking racing.
Mitsubishi had an Eclipse, and it wasn't that big. I mean, you know.
I honestly think it's a racing ship. That was my first guess.
That would be interesting, too.
My gut right now is sort of a interdiction ship. You know, especially if they're going with that bubble type of interdiction approach. You know, if they're going with that straight up, you got to line it up and use a beam. I don't think so. But the name Eclipse could almost be like I'm eclipsing your path of travel with this interdiction bubble, so it's going to knock you out there. You know, that would have some military value as far as a strategic ship to kind of deal with
definitely.
threats.
Well, yeah, that would be your counter piracy front
And we
line
might still be
defense.
looking at something.
Or you know, like a
size.
you know that Vandal, from a military perspective, you know that Vandal boarding parties or Vandal raiding parties come through this part of space. So the military sets up the eclipse. It ends up going through the bubble. It knocks them out of quantum drive, and then there's this overwhelming force that can just slaughter them. You know, it's an interesting option there. So I think that's. Well, and let's put it this way. I don't think that's what it's going to be because it's kind of random compared to other things we've seen. But I think that it could be that, and I think that would be an interesting addition that we don't really have today.
Yeah.
You know, because from the piracy standpoint, the Buccaneer is supposed to get that interdiction weapon. You know, the good guys need one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've been kind of thinking the Eclipse on being a Connie competitor this whole time, but I don't even know why I feel that way.
Why not both? I mean, it'd be Connie size, have decent cargo, but have the interdiction capabilities. I mean, I don't feel like just, the realism aspect. I don't feel like an interdiction bubble is going to be on something that's a small ship. I feel like that's going to be a significant piece of hardware. It's going to take a significant power plant to run that. So I don't think, if it's an interdiction ship, I can't imagine it being smaller than a Freelancer. And I would say Connie size is probably more realistic.
Well,
so maybe
you could almost look at it as like a scaled up version to the Warlock. You know, the Warlock, for example, has the back half of the ship, for example, actually as the EMP generator. You know, so how big does the actual mechanic of an interdiction bubble need to be, I guess, as far as that item is concerned? And then you could kind of scale the ship around it. But, I mean, that's new tech for us. You know, but it's a size 5 hardpoint on the bottom of on a Buccaneer. The Buccaneer is a small ship. But, I think that's probably a different approach to interdiction. That's probably that I've got the direct line of sight on you. I'm not letting you jump because I'm hitting you with whatever this beam is, probably. You know, I think,
you don't. Yeah, you don't want to tell half the system.
Yeah. You know, I think pulling people out of quantum is probably a bubble approach where you need a big ship that can generate that. So, hell, I don't know.
Right.
I thought for a Connie competitor, we were really looking at like the Origin 600 as being the next thing to come in and compete with the Connie. So I don't know. I mean, the Eclipse, it makes sense in that role too. That's where we really don't have a lot to go on, and it's kind of frustrating for me.
Yeah.
We had nothing to go on, basically.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Just a name, pretty much, right?
Make up stuff.
A name and a brand reputation. That's about it.
Pretty much.
I mean, STL's description of it makes the most sense I've heard of so far.
Well, this is true.
That's why you watch my videos.
Exactly. That's why I'm here.
Why we're here.
All right, perfect. Well, I guess before we wrap this up, you guys got anything going on in your lives or projects that you want to pimp?
No, I just need to sleep. That's where I'm at.
I've got a YouTube channel, but I haven't uploaded anything for a while. But if you just look up Brent Odell on YouTube, stuff of me playing guitar. That's all I got to pimp.
Perfect. Clem?
I'm pretty close to launching Clem Gaming as a YouTube channel.
Nice.
That's a big item on my agenda right now. And right behind that, we're continuing work on Bar Citizen, which I'm sure Joren will be happy to hear.
Yeah.
So I'm helping out, get that website updated and whatnot. That's probably going to be, I don't know how long it's going to be, but we're making good progress.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time today. It was a good first video to do on these. Some good discussions there. For those of you guys watching, I think we're going to try and plan on doing these about once a month. I think you'll probably see our participants change a little bit, but at least in the meantime, there's going to be continuing to be uploaded to YouTube. Depending on how smoothly all this goes and how frequently we want to do it, it may change into a live stream format, but at least for now, we're going to stick with this format. So if there's anything you want to see discussed in the next one or just have general feedback, please put them in the comments. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining. Have yourselves a wonderful day and take care.
See ya.